Hey guys, what's happening? Aaron here. Well, finally got around to reviewing this game. I had originally planned it to sort of end the summer review season, which means it's about a week late, give or take. I did try to finish it in time to upload it in August, but I just ran out of time, I guess. Sonic and Knuckles, the last game in the original sort of quadrilogy of Genesis games. My personal favorite block of time for the Sonic games. After the Genesis years, we did get, like Sonic Adventure and Adventure 2, which were good games. But pretty much after that, the series as a whole kind of went downhill pretty badly and pretty quickly. And you're probably wondering, or at least asking yourself, Aaron, why did you skip over Sonic 2 and Sonic 3? Because I reviewed Sonic 1 earlier in the year, and now this is the fourth game in the series. I don't really have an answer for that. I just felt like reviewing Sonic and Knuckles before 2 and 3, so... But it's all good. I got Sonic 2 and 3 coming up next year on the review list. And we'll see them next year in 2018, so... Actually, you know what? Let's just cut the bullshit. I didn't get the review done because I was busy playing Sonic Mania, okay? Because that game is just awesome. If you haven't played it yet, and you're a Sonic fan, go check it out. I don't know if I'm going to review it for this channel yet. I haven't completed it, but you never know, I might review it in the future. As always, thanks for watching, and enjoy this review of Sonic and Knuckles. Thanks.
There wasn't a whole lot of times I remember a sequel to a game. Mainly this is because, as anyone will admit, the sequel usually never eclipses the original. Metal Gear 2 wasn't as good as the original. Super Mario Bros. 2 wasn't as good as the original, etc. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 wasn't as good as... actually that defies convention. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 was way better than the original. But I digress. Later on in the Sonic timeline, we have Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which was good in its own right. Then we have this, Sonic and Knuckles, the direct sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog 3, which this reviewer feels is better than the game that came before it. Little did we know, way back in the mid-90s, that this sequel wasn't a sequel at all. It was just the second half of a much bigger experience. Let's spin dash into this! Released in 1994, just 10 short months after Sonic the Hedgehog 3 came out on the original Sega Genesis, Sonic and Knuckles became to some people a black sheep of the series. Some people praised it, some people still don't think anything of it. Way back in the mid-90s, we didn't know any better. So when Sega announced Sonic and Knuckles as the sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog 3, we all just bought into it. The fact that Sonic and Knuckles could jack into Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and become Sonic the Hedgehog 3 and Knuckles, we just thought, this is fucking amazing! So cool! It's like two games become one! It wasn't until years later that I finally learned this wasn't entirely accurate. See, Sonic the Hedgehog 3, during development, had become so massive in size and scale that Sonic Team realized that their entire game wouldn't fit onto a single Genesis cartridge. Total production time was falling behind, and with Sonic fans eagerly waiting for the next release in the series, Sega had to make a tough decision. They chose to split Sonic the Hedgehog 3 into two games, releasing Sonic 3 first, then the remainder of the game, Sonic and Knuckles, would be released later in the year so Sonic Team had time to finish it. So, for the majority of the time I was growing up, we all thought these two separate games that could miraculously be attached together to form one gaming experience, when really, it was just one game, separated into two cartridges. But enough of that history bullshit, let's get into this. Picking up right after the end of Sonic 3, Dr. Robotnik's Death Egg has crashed into the floating island, on top of Lava Reef's volcanic crater. Robotnik's new plan is to steal the Master Emerald, to provide limitless energy to his new Death Egg. The Master Emerald is guarded by Knuckles, an Echidna, who was fooled by Robotnik into thinking Sonic is the enemy. So Sonic sets out to fix things, and hopefully, find a new ally. Sonic & Knuckles is more or less Sonic the Hedgehog 3 Part 2, in terms of design, stages, etc., etc. There really isn't a whole lot graphically and audio-wise between the two. But since I'm talking about Sonic & Knuckles first instead of Sonic 3, that's coming up next year, I'll discuss it. Graphically speaking, the game looks really good, and still holds up well today, 23 years later. It was released near the end of the Genesis life cycle, and normally games produced during that time frame take full advantage of whatever platform they're released on. Stages are designed well, although I find the backgrounds to be a little dull and lacking, and I've always wondered if Sega had to cut back on background details in order for there to be more going on in the foreground. As usual, there are several zones to pass through on your way to the end. Flying Battery, Lava Reef, and Sky Sanctuary, just to name a few. While Sonic himself has received a graphical overhaul, I feel like the overall design is a little too busy. Previous Sonic games have a very nice balance of foreground detail and background design, whereas after Sonic 3, things just became overly designed. It's not that that's a bad thing, I just prefer the overall look of Sonic 1 and 2. Sonic & Knuckles is just too chaotic. There's too many gags, too many weird things to jump on or bounce off of that aren't really used that much. Too many things to hang on to. Like, too many spinning things just to have spinny things. I do have to say that Sky Sanctuary is neat because, up until that point, we'd never seen a Sonic zone that took place up in the clouds. The audio side of the game also sees improvement over the previous two titles in the series, but again, not entirely sure if it's a good thing or a bad thing. It's not that the music is necessarily bad, per se, just not as memorable as the first game, and nowhere near as good as Sonic 2's soundtrack. Sky Sanctuary has a pretty nice tune, as does Flying Battery, with Flying Battery always making me think of Mad Gear from Sonic 4. Although they were released 20 years apart from each other. The sound effects are your usual Genesis hollowness, so nothing really to talk about there. Sorry, but the SNES just had a much better sound processor. Overall, Sonic & Knuckles is a great game, but is really the second half of another game. I've always enjoyed playing through it on its own, and honestly, I've always thought of it as such. Yes, I've played through Sonic 3 in its completed lock-on form, Sonic 3 and Knuckles, but then it gets to be just a little too long. Like, either game by itself is fine, but together it's just too much. It's easy to see why Sega split it up, and had enough material to fill 2 games. Because there's a shit ton of content there. Much like many of the other older games in the Sonic franchise, it's been ported to everything under the sun, and is easily playable with a variety of emulators nowadays. I usually recommend the Sega Mega Collection for the GameCube if you're interested. I highly recommend it. Thanks for watching, thanks for subscribing, go check it out.